Hey everyone, thank you. This is Erik Johs, VP of Platform Engineering at Medidata. And I want to take a little bit of time today to just discuss a use case that we had at Medidata that was really, implementing Unleash in a highly regulated industry. Before we jump into that, a little bit about myself. As I said, I am the Vice President of Platform Engineering. So we really build, the tooling that drives a lot of Medidata's ecosystem. From services to UIs and a little bit of everything in between. I am based in Denver, Colorado. I've been at Medidata about 2.5 years or so. Before Medidata, my background's really been through software engineering. And in my free time, I spend time with my children. I've got 2 toddlers, so not really a lot of free time, as well as, an avid golfer who used to be much better before children. So today, like I said, we'll talk about, how we went about introducing Unleash, kind of that journey we went on, especially as it applies to the regulatory pieces we have in place at Medidata and how to, the challenges we faced adapting that, kind of the business case and rationale that was the driver to, why do we need to do something different? And then look at the journey that we've kind of taken from going to, no feature flag software all the way up to where we are today and kind of where we're headed in the future. And then we'll have some time at the end for little Q&A. So Medidata, let's start there. What is Medidata? Medidata is a life sciences company. So we are in the clinical trial management space. We've been around for about 25 years. You can see some stats here, really, lots of different clinical trials, touching a lot of different patients, with a lot of different customers. That's led to a lot of different, drugs being approved. So, we kind of touch everything from that journey of early in the clinical trial design, capturing of the data, analyzing the data, to the federal regulations and approvals to bring drugs to market. So now, a little bit of background there. Then we jump into, where were we 2.5 years ago or 3 years ago, right before I joined? Being this highly regulated, very compliant industry, our teams were really focused around process first and foremost, right? Like, and being a technologist by heart, coming in and seeing the struggle with which our teams were working in to deliver software. Right, our standard operating procedures and everything that says, why you can't innovate and how you have to follow the rules of the law and the interpretations of it, right, really limit the what can we build, how can we build it, and it was, I still recall like joining early on when developers were talking about how much time were they spending writing code, and they were, probably spending less than half of their time actually developing software versus working through the processes and different, validations and making sure things were good. There was also, because of those processes, right, we have a very strong focus on we have to build perfect, right? Like there's, and when you're releasing a few times a year and those releases are slow and painful, if we encountered any issues, that was a big deal. So we were really focused on how do we perfect this software in a really imperfect sort of approach, right? We would, go to long code freeze cycles and, we'll do a lot of manual testing. And, I think everyone that's a software engineer knows, like, yes, those are all good things to do, but it doesn't necessarily add any higher confidence. In fact, it probably made it harder to juggle all of the different changes and make sure the software represented that accurate state. Right? So like all of these sorts of things really, took the focus away from delivering a product and thinking about the functionality that we can give to an end user, and really said, how do I follow the rules of the road? How do I make sure everything is perfect? And our innovation suffered, our speed of delivery suffered. And so what did we have to do, right? We have to change our mindset. We have to really focus on how do we drive innovation? How do we make this better for developers so developers can be developers and not spend all of their time on these processes? And then how does this kind of set the stage for us to transform our tech stack, not just in the feature flag management, right? But like, how do we bring new services, new languages, simplification into this world? So that's really, what we started to focus on as we were going through this journey. So obviously, we weren't going to get any money without building a little bit of a business case. So what did our business case look like, right? We knew we needed to change. We know we needed to drive that behavior, as I mentioned before. How does that translate into dollars and cents, right? We went kind of round and round on this. We took an approach of, can we measure developer experience and happiness? Can we correlate release frequency to some financial gain? And we spent a lot of time looking at, okay, how could we show if this is successful? PR commits, right? Like less errors. And we didn't really have a great measure. So we basically kind of laid it out as, with an innovative mindset, if we change how we deliver software, we can expect to save X amount of time. That was one. Now, did we land on that as we started to evolve this? No, right? Because we started to see a lot of different data points that we could then start to measure. Where do we kind of look at it today? And we still do not have a perfect sort of way to measure the impact that Unleash has, aside from seeing things trending in that right direction. So one of the key areas we wanted to focus on, and something that we are advocating for in the Medidata platform space, is really this concept of safer releases, right? So safer releases, as we internally market it, is really focused around keeping things smaller, releasing things on a more aggressive timeline, while having the control, right? So, that's how do we roll out to a gradual portion of our users? How do we do it in a controlled way so that, we're minimizing that risk? Again, all of the main drivers of why we would use a tool like Unleash. But then on top of that, we're layering in our business needs of where are customers more risk adverse versus less. Where's the complexity in our systems or our historical data versus, where it becomes a little easier, and we start to, lead into simplifying that approach as a whole, right? This is also a way for us to break apart our dependencies between monolithic services that have these hard, fast dependencies, which has always also created a lot of logistical nightmare of, let's coordinate with 5 other teams when we're trying to release. And that's hard. And when we're at the tip of the spear, kind of going faster than the rest of the organization, that became even harder, right? The other aspect we're looking at is cost savings, right? So, being a highly regulated industry, when we make mistakes, there's a lot of times financial penalties associated with those mistakes, right? Anywhere from, a few $1,000s to 6-figure fines. And so how do we start to use a tool like this to really make those mistakes less visible, right? Oh, there's a mistake. Great. Let's roll that back before anyone's any the wiser, and we can address it. So it almost allows us to, explore a little bit further in production while not having that high risk of impacting the customers where we would be penalized for mistakes. And then speed up and improve the quality of our products. So again, how do we shift from this perfection mindset into, we can build small pieces, we can push those out, we can test them the right amount, right? So we can look at our regression testing, make sure we're not introducing any changes, and find the balance with our internal quality and validation teams that say, you've got to deliver perfect, versus no, we've got to get it out the door, we've got to iterate, and we've got to start building on these things so that we do introduce more quality as we go, right? So that's kind of the different lenses we've been looking at it through. And it's really actually starting to pay a lot of dividends by looking through that, and it's leading towards this cultural change in our organization. And so, as we're looking at vendors, right? Like, why Unleash? For us, it was, how do we get out of this perfect mindset? And there are a lot of vendors in this space, some that do far more than Unleash, others that do far less. we wanted to look at this and say, we don't need a tool that does everything, right? We want to drive this culture of innovation, incremental value add, and kind of going on this journey of a transformation. And as we were talking and looking, like Unleash really fit that bill, right? It did the feature flag management piece really well. Now, did it have all of the processes in place that we needed to align to? No, right? Nor did we want it to, because we wanted to use this as an opportunity to drive it forward and say, there's different ways to do it. Yes, there's going to be friction as we go towards it, but we found a really good partnership. And, Unleash and the team had been with us kind of the whole way where we encounter a tough issue. How do we move forward? And so that progress over perfect, as Unleash is building and maturing their product, really aligned with what we want to do from a how do we transform ourselves and how do we introduce this to make some, very major changes without a very complex process being introduced. Because, yeah, that would have been easy to follow that pattern and continue to add complexity, but we wouldn't be pushing as far as we could had we started simpler and said, how do we kind of unravel some of these things and find that balance? And so, how did we go about rolling this out? This, to me, I think is one of the more critical pieces of what's made Unleash successful at Medidata, right? Changing a culture is hard. Let's just start there. Even to this day, still very hard as we work through this. So end of 2021, right? We had done a proof of concept with Unleash to say, hey, is a feature flag tool really going to allow us to, make our releases easier, decouple our dependencies? And so, yeah, we did the proof of concept. We said, yep, we think there's a path here, right? So early 2022, we did sign the contract with Unleash, and we started by onboarding a very small subset of our platform organization, right? I think the first group was, we had done the POC with 3 or 4 people. We rolled this out to a group of about 8 to just start working through some of the challenges we knew we were going to face as we embark on this journey, right? We looked at a couple different options to roll out. We had evaluated, but great, we've got this new powerful tool. We could just put it in the hands of our organization. Everyone can kind of transform, but we wanted to do something a little more controlled so that we kind of started to guide what good looks like in this organization and made sure we didn't create a whole bunch of interesting use cases that people are using right out of the gate, and that complexity would kind of just like drive forward from day one. And so we started with a very small team and started on some very simple use cases to kind of take our learnings, to figure out what that partnership with Unleash looked like as we encountered challenges. Like, could we get the support we needed? Did we make sure that, again, simplification first is really what the focus was there. This also forced what do these new processes look like, right? So in a world where everything is a manual, little bit archaic process, how do we make sure we're pushing on those boundaries as well and not just saying, here's a new tool that follows into that process? And so this, we started with like some simple flag naming conventions and how do we group our projects in a way that hopefully set us up for success. Again, we're iterating through this as well. So it's not, we had to get it right out of the gate, but let's get it right for now, and then we'll evolve it as we go. Right. So 2022 was really around establishing the foundation and building with this small team to say, hey, here's these use cases. Right now in late 2022, early 2023, we added a few more teams from in-platform, right? And expanded that out. And then that was probably the second half of the year in 2022 is where it really went to the majority of our platform organization, which is, a little over 100 developers. And so a lot of different Scrum teams learning. We continued to kind of rein that in and create some subject matter expertise and that was collaborating with these teams as they onboarded. The 2 additional teams was really, how do we reach outside of platform? Because yes, we want to go faster, but we ultimately want all of Medidata to go faster. So how do we take that and take our learnings and say, here's what you can do. Here's the use cases that we think you should start with to drive this cultural change internal to your organizations. And so, we had one organization that we partnered really close with on a lot of other projects. So they were eager to adopt this change. And then we had another team that, had expressed some curiosity. They were evaluating another vendor in this space, which we had no idea, and said, well, hey, you don't need to do that. We have an enterprise level solution. And so we started working with these teams to kind of, again, similar to how we did it internal, really focus on driving the consistency, simplification, thinking about our use cases, and not just saying, well, I can make this work, without knowing, is it the right way to do it? And so that's where, we started to do that. And as we were going down that journey, we started to see more teams start getting interested in it, us socializing out. Hey, we're going faster. We're doing things different. Our safer release philosophy. Here's what we're doing, which then drove that interest to say, hey, like, we want to learn more about this. Now, it wasn't perfect up through this point, right? Like, we still had Unleash with a lot of manual processes that we were having to go through that was, quite frankly, just overhead, right? Of, hey, we've got to check this box. We've got to do this paperwork. Even if things were behind a feature flag, because that was the world we were coming from. It's still this like world we're navigating today, but we're starting to move towards a simpler, process. And the processes in these highly regulated industries are really focused around, the right level of controls and the right level of visibility into those changes that were made. And so, talking with Unleash, letting them know our problems. Hey, we're trying to transform. Here's what we're running into, right? We started, brainstorming this idea with change requests where they knew they wanted to do something. We said, hey, we've got a lot of feedback here. And so how can we start to do this? And so 2024 was really, let's focus on this. Let's see what we can do to kind of address those access control or, just general control needs, along with who can we see this from an auditability standpoint. And so internal to platform, similar like rolling out Unleash, we said, hey, let's pilot change requests. Again, we don't want this change management to be one huge thing when an organization is not ready to adopt an insane amount of change. So let's start small, let's get our learnings, and let's make sure we're leading by example. And change request was our first path where, we kind of worked through how many different approvers, do we have the right traceability and auditability for our teams that are worried about that sort of thing, to say, hey, we can see this. While we're doing this, we're going to keep doing a little bit of the manual process just to make sure it works, right? And then, while we're doing this, we're still continuing to push Unleash out towards more and more teams, and they may be going to the first iterations while we're kind of evolving to the next iteration further ahead. What's up for this next year, right? Like, currently, probably in the last month or two, our largest product and from a financial standpoint, which is our electronic data capture software, Rave, they are starting to adopt this concept of Unleash. So we're partnering with them to say, hey, how can we, also allow you guys to go faster, do things different, modernize your tech stack where, they're a 25-year-old product. So a little bit less modern than some of the platform services, although we have a lot of similar sharing between the two. We're also looking at, FedRAMP certification. And what does that mean, right? So, some of our due diligence was done this year with Unleash to say, hey, if we move down this path, right, we are on a SaaS offering of Unleash. What does it look like if we have either, are you guys going to FedRAMP certify? Or if not, what does it look like to bring this Unleash solution into the hosted environment so we have more control and compliance for the regulatory purposes? We do have the flexibility. So while the FedRAMP discussions are still ongoing at our corporate level, we do know we have a path to either stay the course that we've been doing or move to something self-hosted, and we have a partner that can help, make this fairly seamless. So we're going to be continuing to do that and explore that while we continue to drive Unleash into the broader organization. Right now we're probably about 50% of the way through our different teams. I would expect that we accelerate over the next few months. And so just to close here, kind of what does our journey look like, right? And some of this data is a little bit stale, but I think it articulates kind of the path and how we adopted, right? So again, very early on in 2021 or late in 2021 with our proof of concepts into, middle of last year, we went from a handful of users up to upwards of 285 or so. Currently, we're pushing about 350 users, and we're seeing a pretty steady adoption on a very regular cadence, right? And as more teams go, it's we see waves and peaks, but we're never really seeing valley or the drop offs. It's always, hey, we just keep getting more and more people jumping on board. And then to articulate the business case, right? Again, how are we telling our story? We're still working through it, but we did go from a platform release where we were at about 125 in 2020, small adoption in 2021. 2022, you can kind of see we really took off, and we went from 165 to 230 releases throughout last year, and then moving into this year, we're projected to finish. And sorry, this graph is 1 year behind. I'm just realizing that now. Right by the end of this year, we believe we'll be at 250 or 265 releases. So we've almost doubled our releases in a very short period of time. And as we're looking, we're seeing similar trends as we introduce this to other teams as well. This is also done with, probably flat headcount growth really is where we're at. We saw a little influx in 2021, 2022, but this last year we're actually coming down in headcount and still maintaining the velocity of our releases going up. So, again, while changing culture, changing the way you work in a giant organization is no easy feat. I did want to articulate that, with the right controls, with the right processes in place, there is a journey to success. And while it is painful, it's also very rewarding that we are making this shift, and it's having an insanely large impact on the broader organization. So with that, I want to just take a minute to thank you guys for your time and attention, and I will turn it over to the audience with any questions. Thanks.
Wow. Thank you so much, Erik. I hope you can join me on the with video and audio. There you are. Remember to unmute yourself.
Yeah, almost did.
This was fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with Unleash, Erik. It's just amazing to see your growth and your progress. And I actually got one question, and one of the questions you actually answered on the last slide. So I will start with that one. Like, the question was around how often do you release today? So it looks like you are getting closer and closer to one daily release, if I understood the graphs correctly.
So we are still far from a daily release, right? Like, we've got a lot of different services that number is rolled up to.
Exactly.
So we went from, probably once a quarter on average, right? Some of these services, we still don't release even once a year. But we are now, most of our services and platform are starting to go out on a bi-weekly cadence or monthly on the slow side of things. We also have some that are going out, probably closer to weekly at this point, but we're continuing to push on how do we make that even faster.
That's cool. That's cool. So you mentioned several times, and I know this by myself as well, like changing culture is super, super hard. Particularly, so what we are talking about is also this notion that deploying a new version of your application doesn't necessarily mean that you're releasing new functionality to your users. So I have a personal question on that note, because obviously I'm not too versed myself in highly regulated industries, and how does actually the kind of the legal side, or what is a release anyway in that matter?
So, for us, a release is, really deploying a new version of the software. So are there changes going out? And, it's looked at through a couple lenses. There's the back end side of the things, which are, the processes are still there, but they're, a little bit different than if we do something customer facing. But that's really what entails a release. Now, other areas that we've had to fight in for this, right, is like redefining some of this of, what is a release? How do we do it when we're putting something behind a feature flag that's not customer facing, not actually impacting what the customer is going to see and be
Or
impacted.
what if that is a gradual release? It's on for some clients, but not all
And,
clients. Is that
yes,
really a release?
and it is, right. It is, and we're documenting these releases, and we put release notes out, and it's also forced our product teams to change how we
Yeah,
communicate with the customer. It used to be, here's your release, it's coming out this date, here's everything
exactly.
in the release. And now, we still have that, but the communication is, you're going to get it sometime in this window, right? And
Yeah,
we're still learning how to best communicate those changes with customers. But it's different, right? And I think in
yeah,
an
yeah,
industry that is highly regulated and status quo has been the norm for so long, right? Like, it does take a lot of collaboration with our customers and all of our internal teams to say, we are really reimagining what all of this does and how we communicate it. Um, yeah, we don't have a perfect answer yet. It's something we fight with on a, pretty common frequency still.
yeah. And I feel, yeah, because we also have some of that. Obviously, we are not highly regulated or anything like that, but we have obviously some commitment towards the large enterprises like yourself and how we communicate. Make sure that it's not a surprise when we do bigger changes. So I feel it to some extent, and I must admit we haven't found the perfect solution yet. Uh, Maybe a middle ground for us is that we do have the pro, the kind of the self-serve offering. So we do whatever testing we can on that segment, just so we can at least know that we have more confidence when we are shipping functionality for the large and more important enterprises.
Yeah, and I think, like, we kind of have the same thing, and I actually look at it through a little bit different lens, right? Of like, I don't think we're ever going to be perfect, right?
Uh,
Because, like, perfect means we become stagnant again and we stop trying to innovate. And I don't think, software engineering is only about innovating in the technology. It's also the, how do we get things into the hands of our users quicker, simpler, faster, right? So I think, like, yeah, we continue to strive to improve where we see opportunities.
yeah, exactly. Well said. I think we will end with that and allow the audience for some break before the next presentation. Again, thank you so much, Erik.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.